Well, in today's episode, I'm excited to have with me Charles Lee. Hello, Charles.
Hey Eric, so good to be with you today.
Yeah, we go way back. You were in ministry in California, and I was as well. I remember one of your of many unique initiatives, Idea Camp, and some of the things that you like to try and do. Talk a little bit about your journey, both as a pastor and now in the space with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, years ago when we connected, I think it was in the context where I think you were at a church called Mosaic at the time, and you and Erwin were looking for some space, and I think we had some space, and I think that's how we first kind of intersected beyond other events. But yeah, I was in a vocational ministry. It was mostly bivocational at the time. I was teaching at a university. I was a professor, and then on some of the weeknights and weekends, I would go and help lead churches. And so, as a part of that process, I ended up planting four churches in teams, and so that was a great experience. And then I just felt like during that time, as I was engaging, I think I was super early on social media, leveraging technology, really thinking about marketing and messaging and branding. And so I started getting a lot of opportunities outside of the church to really help brands scale and achieve some clarity. And so after some therapy, I decided that I was going to launch a company called Ideation. And then since then, I've been just a serial entrepreneur. The company's still going well. And most recently, I've been investing in companies, starting multiple brands, and just kind of scaling that impact work. But my heart's always been to think about how do I better serve people. So that's been kind of the clear through line through all of the transitions in my life.
Well, to me, I was always so encouraged and amazed by your serial entrepreneurial efforts, whether it's starting multiple churches or
Yeah.
now helping start businesses. What do you think the church, which tends to not be quite so adventurous, what
Mm.
could the church learn from entrepreneurs that would make us more effective?
Yeah, I think a couple of things top of mind. One is really embracing this idea of experimentation. I think from my experience of working with churches, there is some pressure for, I think, church leaders, and you know this better than I, Eric, where there's almost like a pressure to always be right, or a pressure to, since you are being led of God, to lead a congregation, that there may be this need to be on the right side of decision making. And the nature of innovation is such that you have to give yourself permission to experiment, invest in possibilities, fail often, and be able to still move forward. And I think that's one thing to kind of think about. I think it's an opportunity if some churches can get in the mindset that, what, we need some R&D. We need some time to create innovation, to incubate ideas, to develop them. That's definitely one. The other thing is, in the area of just kind of leading a culture of innovation like that. I think it just requires a different mode of thinking. And I think given just the centuries of heritage and history and practice, I understand it's not always easy. But that ability for a leader to think like that in light of what's changing, and then also engaging fields that they may be less familiar with, because in my work with innovation with brands is that often innovation is the result of two or more seemingly unrelated ideas intersecting, and
Mm.
that's where innovation happens. But if you're always constantly in the same space, it's hard to innovate sometimes outside of maybe program innovation. To really think it at a high level probably requires us to be in multiple industries at the same time.
I think that's great insight. And, oftentimes, especially in this post-pandemic, post-Christian world, it's
Mhm.
easy to just hope everything gets back to the way it was, in the good old days of
Yeah.
2019, before the pandemic. I know you're connected with, a broad network of pastors and business leaders. What are some of the things you're seeing coming out of the pandemic? And I know we're still in the midst of it, but as things open up a bit
Yeah.
more and more, what do you suspect church leaders need to know about this new world in which we're embarking?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I know what we're seeing in the retail space, in some of the tech spaces, is this kind of merging of the physical and the digital, as well as really personalized or customized technology integrations. I think what this means for the church is to think in terms of not some type of binary type of idea where you have an online or offline type of experience, but thinking about what we would call in the business space like the customer journey, increasing empathy for the people you're trying to serve. And the reality is people are going to seamlessly be online and offline at the same time. So what does that mean for local ministries? I think that's an opportunity to think in terms of like less about going back to where we were. People are going to work differently. The future of work, all the research showing that of all of the alterations that are happening, we've seen not just during COVID, but it will continue beyond COVID. I think that's the reality. So for churches, like what are the opportunities or what does a faith experience as a
Mm,
part of a local body of faith believers look like that seamlessly integrates some physical elements as well as digital elements, and then also personalized, customized elements too.
mm.
I think of examples of in education, there's high effort in AI in the way that technology can improve learning by 4 to 5 times. And I have some friends working in that space. Are there things like in the areas like discipleship that you can actually increase effectiveness by leveraging technology that can even speed up and make learning that much more efficient?
Wow, that's really helpful. A lot of your resources are up at charlestle.com.
Mhm.
You have the Ideation podcast, the book, Good Idea, Now What? How to Move
Yeah,
Ideas to Execution. I want to ask you maybe a more personal question. I mean, you and I were just talking about our kids
yeah,
before we hit record here. Both of us have, kids in their teens, or for me, I've got one in his early 20s. For this emerging generation, with what's been in the news of late, and the division that's in our nation, and
yeah.
just the lack of connection that a lot of young people have to faith, what do you see as helping this next generation connect to the church, to the message of Jesus? Are you seeing things there in California and some of your clients that it gives you hope?
Yeah, I think this whatever you label the next generation to be um, does genuinely care about our world, and I feel like if our apologetic does not include love and generosity and empathy and compassion, those kinds of elements that really connect to the heart of a young person, I don't think they'll ever hear the message.
Mm,
And being able to point to models of people that live like that. I think what still like comes through is when young people see adults that genuinely live out their faith, whatever that means, in a way that is very humble, in a way that makes sense to them, that they are loving their immediate families, their community, contributing to the wellness and the goodness of society. I think those are really strong and they sound so like basic. So when a young person hears, because of all of the manipulation that could happen via media, like, even some of the technology that can fake what's true, I mean, that's going to continue because there's some political benefits as well as some, other agenda driven benefits in tech that allow for that. But despite that, I think young people can see through a lot of that. I mean,
mm,
they are going to be swayed. So what's going to be the differentiator? And I feel like it's more and more people who can walk alongside of them, because what we do see with a lot of young people is they do have aspiration, but they, don't always have the guides. It
mm.
may not be coming from the home. So who are the ones who are going to walk with young people as they make decisions in life? And I think that's an incredible opportunity as a church.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up just such a great point. And we saw this, the summer of 2020 with the rise in protest after the death
Mhm.
of George Floyd. And even now with the tragedy of more racist attacks against Asian
Mhm.
Americans, do we want the corporate world to be the guides, and how do we create a more loving world? Or do we want to be the guides, as
Mhm.
people of faith? what are
Yeah.
some thoughts, even as an Asian American, of
Yeah.
ways that people who really have a heart for wanting to make a difference, how can we make a difference? Is it just a post on social media? Does that do it, or is there more to it?
Yeah.
What do you think we can do?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question. Honestly, as an Asian American right now, anyway, I got to say, one of the sectors that's the most silent is the church.
Mm,
And I think that creates a lot of pain for me personally,
mm,
because I want the church to be a great reflection of Jesus and his teachings. And I think there are a lot of things churches can do. And because we live in a culture where if you are silent, you can be deemed complicit.
right, right.
I think it to a certain level, if you feel like as a church, you're a leader of a church, you have influence in the community, I think you do need to speak up. And it's not, some people say, well, let's not get political. And I guess some can always reframe a conversation and make it political. I get
Mhm,
that. But at the root of like pure religion, the things that we all claim to stand for, if we can't stand for people who are suffering and in pain, I feel like that's not a gray issue. I think that's
mhm.
pretty black and white and aligns. I just always like, and places like when you were like, with Mosaic and other ministries that I've crossed paths with you. I mean, that's been the thing is like, where would Jesus walk right now? Like, who would he sit with right now?
Yeah,
I feel like week by week that might change, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And to see our nation go through that kind of pain, but the church either, I think the challenge is though, like, especially the churches that have influence, that primarily has, white evangelicals or mainstream in leadership, is it's less about trying to prove you're not racist. I think it has to be more about figuring out what we can do, whether
mm,
it's funding things, walking alongside, going to a peaceful protest, whatever it is, it means the world to people in your congregation. And
yeah,
even for me right now, we're working with through our church I'm part of, it's a large, well-known ministry. The last 2 weekends, there was no mention
mm,
of about anything Asian American.
mm,
And so as an Asian American member of a church like that, it just kind of makes me wonder, like, either the leadership is doing something else that I don't know about, benefit of the doubt, or it feels disconnected from the
yeah,
real world.
yeah,
And so I think that's part of it is there are plenty of things and asking people like me and others, as it relates to whatever issues, like I think if Christian leaders and pastors can ask, there's so many great people in every church that can help you with wisdom, practical things a church can do, and that'll only strengthen ownership and participation and
mm,
generosity, those kinds of things. I feel like it's a great opportunity for the church to actually do something.
that's beautiful. Yeah, we have several Asian American families here at our church, and it was a really fascinating week. Uh, just being able to hear insights from some of these folks who are leaders, key leaders in our church, and
Yeah,
being able to listen and learn. It makes me sad that it sometimes takes a tragedy like this to have those
yeah,
conversations, but at the same
yeah,
time, I just found so much beauty from those conversations. And one in particular, I have a neighbor who a few years ago saw our sign in the yard that said "Love everyone, life by life." It was talking about our church, a slogan that we use here. And he
mm,
asked, I watch the news a lot. I don't really follow Jesus, but is your church okay with my family? His family had immigrated from Vietnam. His parents had. He'd grown up his whole life in Texas, but he wasn't sure if, as an Asian man married to an Asian woman, he could bring his kids to my church just because of what's in the news. And so
yeah,
to invite him and for them to feel welcomed and loved and to meet some of our pastors who are Asian Americans who grew up in Texas, just like him, it was really beautiful. But last week when I called him and said, "Hey, just with all that's going on in the news, how are you?" I mean, he just opened up and
yeah,
just shared so much about this underlying current of feeling like the outsider has been exponentially ratcheted up to
yeah,
where he has genuine fear,
yeah,
of what might happen to his parents or his kids, and so I
yeah.
appreciate so much what you had to say. It is important that the church is out in front of this. I wonder too, Charles, what are some other thoughts you have when it comes to activism, entrepreneurialism. Give
Yeah.
us a little bit of sense of, as you look into the future. I feel like you might live there. Tell us what it's like over there, working with some of these companies in the spaces that you
Yeah.
do. What were some other thoughts that you might have to help us?
Yeah. I think the future is here. I think, you know, I think people are going to continue to align business with impact. Will there always be? I think it gets trickier the larger the business is as businesses grow. So there will be challenges when you have to answer to expectations around profitability and, but I mean, apart from some of those scenarios, I mean, the rest of us that run small to medium-sized businesses, some of us have ability to impact larger ones, is I think we have a golden opportunity to do good in this world. And for me, wealth has always been about stewardship. That if God allows me to acquire wealth, and in some areas I've been super fortunate to do that, it only gives me more freedom to strategically leverage that to invest in others, whether it's a business or in philanthropy, like my wife and I work on. I mean, those kinds of areas are all opportunities to leverage whatever we have. Some of us will have more privilege than others from a societal standpoint. And because of that, it's whether you can choose to keep it for yourself or help, really others along the way. I learned early on in leadership, one of my professors in college said, because I was looking at some opportunities in one space, and I was like, man, I don't see anybody like looks like me. And he said basically, okay, you could either go somewhere else or you could try to create a path for
Mm,
others. And I'm
mm,
glad I chose to create a path for others. And so I think it's that, I think all of us can make a difference. All of us can contribute to our communities, whether they're of faith or not. I think that's not the point. So I think our ability to do that, and I think the future of business looks like that, and culture is going to demand that. The level of transparency, the level of accountability is going to go through the roof. And I'm pretty sure pretty soon, if it hasn't already, it will be a standard that people are going to be expecting of churches as well, because it's impacting business, it's impacting nonprofits. I could see that, people are going to want to know, like, where do you really stand? What do you are really into? Where are you investing time and resources? So I think people are going to want that very soon.
yeah. Charles, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Keep up the amazing work. And thanks for opening that path for many people. Really grateful for you.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Appreciate you.